and you guys can get
Right.
started.
Terrific. We are happy to do so. Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Jenna Lebowich. I'm a registered dietitian in White Plains, and I am very excited to be back with Kiddie Academy. During the pandemic, actually right after Leah opened up, I did a parent education program as well. Similar topic is what we're doing today. So it's really nice to be back. I'm going to go ahead and well, let me introduce myself, give you a little bit of background first and introduce the person sitting next to me, my intern, Caroline, and then we will share my screen and we'll go from there. So I'm in private practice in White Plains. I've been a private practice since 2010. Not only do I see patients for individual nutrition counseling for families and individuals, but I also am the consulting dietitian for a number of local groups, including Kiddie Academy and some other child care centers. I work with a variety of health conditions, families, and individuals of all ages. And my emphasis is really on cooking and healthy meal preparation. So I work in the kitchen with my clients, with families or individuals, helping people to make better, healthier, more diverse food choices. So when we're talking about parenting specifically, I am a parent. My daughter is 22, so I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum from all of you. So I am proof that you will survive early childhood and they will eventually graduate from college and you will be very happy. But I'm sharing my experience with you today, both as a registered dietitian nutritionist, as well as my own parenting experience. So you're getting a little bit of both there. Sitting next to me is Caroline Palacio. Caroline is a grad student at Lehman College. She's getting her MS in nutrition and completing her last year of practical experience before she becomes a dietitian. So very soon she will be out there doing all this good stuff. She's actually worked at White Plains Hospital and had a good amount of clinical experience. I'm going to share my screen in a moment to get us started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we can either answer them as we go or we can go back to them at the end, or you can hold on to them for the end of the presentation and we'll make sure to leave some time for question and answer at the end. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I feel like I haven't done this since, deep COVID. This is a nice
Change of pace.
nice change of pace, exactly. Okay, everybody see the screen okay? Amani, we're good? Great. All right. So our topic today, what we're going to be talking about is building healthy eating habits in children. So we're going to be talking about setting some basic foundations. Now, as adults, we all have good and bad eating habits, right? I'm sure there's all things that we are pretty happy that we do and things we wish maybe we do a little bit differently. And a lot of our own habits are things that we learned from our own parents when we were children. So as new parents, as parents of very young children, you are in a great position to make choices now that can help build good, healthy habits in your children to stay with them for their whole lives. So, no deep pressure on you or anything, but the choices you make now will be with them forever. So today we're going to focus on habits for building healthy eaters and children who will grow up to be healthy adults. A lot of experts in early childhood nutrition and pediatrics have told us that investing in early childhood nutrition is a surefire strategy. The returns are incredibly high. So just the fact that you're watching this video, that you are participating with us, shows that you value this investment too. All right, so let's get going. Okay, so here's our highlights of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about food choices and what you prepare and serve at home. We're going to talk about meal modeling at the table, and we're going to touch on physical activity and screen time because all of these are pieces that help to build healthy eaters. As we said in the beginning, everybody's got all kinds of habits when it comes to food and eating. And as we know, bad habits or even good habits can be hard to break, right? It takes a long time to build a habit, but it takes a long time to break them as well. So the sooner in life that we build good, healthy habits, the easier it is to keep them and to stay as healthy as possible. And when good habits are in place, it's easier to resist bad habits, or let's not say bad, let's say not as good, not as positive habits. So a couple of key concepts that I'd like to start out by putting on the table for us. First of all children can learn how to eat well, but it takes time, patience, and courage to let a child learn to eat at their own pace. So it can be incredibly frustrating. It can drive you nuts, but with patience and time, any child really can learn how to eat well. And remember that it's a continuum. So, how you feed your baby will affect how they eat as a toddler. How you feed your toddler affects how they eat as a child. And that child grows into a teenager. And that teenager could be a healthy eater with great habits, or that teenager could be a kid who worries about their body shape, experiments with dieting, starts eating what their friends are eating, making not so healthy choices, right? So, the things that you do early on can really set them up for success later. So we're going to get into talking about these three areas: the food choices, the role modeling, and setting an example for staying active. So as I said, I have a 22-year-old. I am swearing to you as a parent that setting a good example for your kids really does work. Okay. The better example that you set, the better off you will be down the line, and the better relationship that you and your child have with food, you'll have the long-term benefit as well. So good health starts with you, and parents are the role models. Um, as you probably already know, your children are great imitators. So you want to give them something positive to imitate, right? And you want to be the example for your children. So you're their role model. Your habits affect their habits. If your habits are healthy, if you're eating a balanced diet, if you're getting regular exercise, if you wake up in the morning with a positive outlook for the day, your children are likely to build those same habits as well. They're going to mimic what they see in you. So to be a healthy eater, to raise a healthy eater, sorry, you need to be able to model those behaviors yourself. If you tell your child that they can never have soda, but yet you drink soda, what kind of message is that setting, right? So we want to be consistent in that. Remember that the other adults and older siblings, grandparents, caretakers, teachers, friends are also role models for your child. So if you have a standard for what we eat at home or what we don't, it's important that the grandparent or that the babysitter help to reinforce that as well. Otherwise, your children are getting mixed messages and their role models are inconsistent. And I'm sure you've probably found that the teachers at school are pretty good role models when it comes to meals and how we approach that. And that's part of their training. Um, Remember that you are in control of what food comes into your house. So you can prioritize healthier eating and make that the norm, right? If we don't keep bags of chips in our house, if we don't keep soda in our house, then your child doesn't learn that this is something that's normal, that this is something that they should be having in their diet all the time, right? So it's setting those priorities for your family and role modeling that. And just remembering that you are the greatest influence on your child's eating habits, particularly in the first decade of their life. Once they're teenagers, becomes a lot harder. You have a lot less control and a lot less influence. But those first 10 years, man, you can really put in a lot of influence and really shape and mold their attitudes towards food. Um, Really important through all of this is to stay positive in your approach to healthy eating choices. So that might mean encouraging your child to try new foods, even if they're not your favorite food. I am not a fan of green peppers, but I would still cook with them in a recipe and encourage my child to try them and make that decision for herself as to whether it's something that she likes. Okay. So you're being open to trying new foods and letting your child see you try new foods is an important thing, right? That's again that role modeling and behavior setting. Be vocal about foods when you're talking with your children. Talk about taste, talk about texture. Get them excited about what they're eating, right? Not just the cupcake, but also, wow, these carrots are really delicious, or I really like this broccoli. What do you think about it? Or man, these, crispy potatoes that we made or have a nice texture to them. And that's how children learn. They get that information from you. And in addition to your eating habits, you also want to emulate good sleep habits, physical activity routines, and very important as a parent, positive ways to manage stress, because obviously those are all things that you're role modeling for your child. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline for a little bit, and she's going to talk about some things that you can do when you are preparing meals and shopping with your child for encouraging making healthy choices.
So, one way to role model is choosing healthy foods is at a grocery store. Some ways to do these are having your children partake in healthy eating in all forms of in all steps of the process, from planning a grocery list, grocery shopping, cooking, and eating together. You want to make them feel involved, and that will make them excited about eating healthy together. Using shopping time as additional learning opportunities to talk about colors, numbers, learning letters. This is also an opportunity to make the experience educational and fun, such as a color game, such as what colors is banana, what colors is apple, counting, how many eggs are in a dozen. You want to educate them on where the foods they eat come from, such as did you know these bananas came all the way from California, or do you remember where eggs come from? Educate them on how to make healthy choices, indirectly teaching them by using fruits, vegetables, healthier foods as an example. So you want to also get creative in the kitchen. Take this as an educational step. You want to cut foods into fun shapes, for example, as seen in the picture using the cookie cutter to make fun shapes, slicing a pepper and asking them what shape it will be. You want to encourage your child to be inventive in the cooking process. Let your kids take risks. Let them experience with different spices and ingredients at age appropriate level, of course. You want to create their own dishes and make them special to them. For example, Beth's sweet potatoes. It doesn't have to be different. Just making it personalized to the child is best. You want to get creative with making new snacks. Some great suggestions are fruit smoothies, rainbow fruit skewers, fruit salad, whole wheat tortilla wraps with nut butter, or broccoli trees. We have a handout for you with our simple healthy smoothie recipes and some suggestions for putting together simple healthy snacks. We will share that link at the end in the chat so you can download and look at it. You also want to elaborate on playing with foods, get their hands in there, let them feel textures and explore smells, let them use all their senses.
Okay. So Caroline's talked about the grocery shopping, the meal preparation piece. Now I want to talk about what happens when you're actually sitting down at the table as a family. So my number one rule when I'm working with families is to say that we offer the same food to everyone at the table. Okay. Everybody gets the same meal. They might have some variations to it. We might pick and choose, but we don't want to get into the habit of being a short order cook. We don't want to get into the habit of making individual meals for every different family member, or you will never, never have a positive meal situation. So you can be flexible with components, with seasonings, but the base for everybody should be the same. And like I said, you can have some small variations, but stick to the base ingredients. So for example, if there's a dish that your family enjoys that has spicy contents, making a portion of it without the spice, if that's going to be more appropriate for your child. If your child has texture issues, so for example, I had a family where chicken Parmesan was a favorite, but the child had texture issues with the sauce and the cheese. So the parents would make the chicken cutlets. They would leave chicken cutlets separately for the child, and then they would bake the rest of it with the sauce and the cheese for the rest of the family. And then as the child would become more open and more adventurous to trying things, maybe they would put sauce on the plate and the child would have it on the plate, but not touching. And then eventually they could get closer to having it on there together. Taco night is a great opportunity for having variety, for everybody being able to make their own thing and choose their toppings and choose their fillings. It's also a great way to accommodate maybe a parent who's vegetarian versus another parent who eats meat. So you could have different fillings, different vegetables. Everybody gets to mix and match for what they like, but you're all enjoying the same meal together. And thinking about family style meals, putting everything on the table, letting the child or all the family members pick the components that they're putting on their plate. And one thing that I also always recommend is making sure that there's at least one food on the table that each person likes. So, and that may be the parent as well, by the way. If somebody is hesitant about the entree, making sure that the bread or the baby carrots or the sliced cucumbers or the glass of milk, something else is there that will be attractive and will be consumed by that family member, even if it's not the whole meal. Um, what's important to remember is your child will not starve if they don't eat everything you put in front of them at a meal. Okay. So making sure that there's at least one thing that's familiar and safe is going to help them at least feel like, well, I'm not completely freaked out, right? There's something here that is recognizable to me that I can have, and they will not walk away from the table empty. They will not be starving. And that's also part of the patience piece, right? Of the don't give up, be patient. The food continues to be put out there, and it's all part of how our family eats and the choices that we make. Now, where things do get a little complicated. Leah's raising her hand. Do you have a question?
I just had a question on that, and
Sure.
maybe I can go on to that next. But in terms of the like having the one thing, so my boys, like one of them, he loves apples and fruit, and so we always try to cut up some fruit because I know he'll eat that. The question is, do you suggest just asking them to like at least take a bite of the other food before? Because like he'll eat like a whole cantaloupe or all of the apples and like avoid everything else. And so we've been trying to say like, hey, you need to at least like eat some of your meat just because like it
Right.
seems better. Like he'll just eat cantaloupe for like 3 weeks for dinner. So what do you guys recommend, or how do you
Sure.
like think we should think about it?
So we'll talk about that a little bit later when we
Oh,
get in
perfect.
about the reward, the piece about food as a reward. But so I think that it's important to continue the messaging of, okay, there is something here that you like, and I'm glad, you're not walking away from the table hungry. Everybody else is having the meat. I'd like for you to try a little bit of it, but we want to be careful about pressure. Okay. So it's saying, I'm going to put a little bit on your plate. I'd like for you to try it, but there shouldn't be punishment or reward tied to it. And we want to be really careful about saying you won't get the cantaloupe until you've had the meat, right? We don't want to tie those together into a reward and punishment type of situation. We simply want to make it that there's meat on your plate and there's the cantaloupe on your plate. I would like you to have some of both, but I'm not going to fight with you if you don't. And I think that in the longer term, and also I'm sure that if you think about what else your child eats over the course of the day, he's probably getting protein from other sources, I hope. If not, we should have a separate conversation. Um, but whether he eats the meat at that meal at that time, nutritionally may not be the most urgent issue. It's really more of an acclimation. So continuing to serve it, to put it on his plate, and to make it the normal habit that everybody in our family has this at the same time. And eventually, maybe he might eat it. Or eventually he'll grow out of, and he'll get really bored of cantaloupe, and he'll realize that he has to eat something else.
You would think he would get bored of cantaloupe, but yes, I'm sure one day he'll eat some
He's
other
going to hold
stuff.
on to my cantaloupe. Yep. But I do want to talk about something else that ties in here. I'm actually going to hand this over to Caroline to talk a little bit about allergy awareness, because as we talk about having the same meal for everybody and different components for different family members, we do want to keep in mind that family members may have different food allergy issues, and we have to be respectful of that as well.
So it's important to consider food allergens when planning and preparing family meals. This picture shows the 9 food allergens, which are milk, eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybeans, and sesame. So according to the CDC, 4 to 6% or 1 in 13 children have food allergies. Children, babies, are most likely to experience food allergy symptoms, but they can occur at any age. Allergens are substances that trigger an immune system response. body sees the protein in these substances as foreign invaders. Typical symptoms can include anaphylaxis, hives, and itchiness. It's best to introduce allergenic foods in small amounts to check for reactions. Potential allergen foods are also best introduced individually so you can determine if they cause reaction. If you are hesitant, just speak to your medical doctor for appropriate diagnosis. Also, exposure to potential allergens at an early age in small controlled amounts is the best way to find out if they have an allergy exists, and B, to build up immunity to potential allergens. There was a great study done in Israeli that showed that the exposure to peanut puffs called Bamba for toddlers found that children who were exposed at a younger age to this peanut snacks had fewer peanut allergens because of built tolerance. You also want to be careful about reading food labels and to look for hidden allergens. Also, be careful cross-contamination, where one substance may touch another substance and then there'll be that bacteria on it.
Or the allergens.
The allergen.
Right,
Sorry.
you go from one to another. So I want to talk a little bit, and Leah, this is what you had asked earlier about rewarding with attention, not with food, right? So rewarding or restricting with certain foods makes it difficult for a child to follow their hunger cues. Forbidden foods become more desirable. So that's why I was saying to you, we want to be careful to not say, you'll get the reward of the melon after you've eaten the meat. So we want to reward with attention, with other behaviors, things like that. One thing to be really careful about is rewarding with sweets. And how many of us were raised with sit down, be a good girl, and then you get a cookie, right? And where did that lead to? Well, I love cookies. Rewarding with sweets can actually lead to selective eating and mealtime battles down the line. So kids who are ingrained that sweets are rewarded for positive behavior are more likely to have obesity and other health conditions as adults. In 2016, there was a study out of the UK where researchers looked at children ages 3 to 5 years and the feeding practices that their parents used. And then they looked at them again between ages 5 and 7. And what they found was that the children who were more likely to be emotional eaters at ages 5 to 7 were the children whose parents used food as a reward when they were younger. So these children built a psychological connection to using food emotionally as a soothe themselves, as a treat, to make themselves feel better. And that was seen as they were getting older. And studies show that unexpected psychological effects can really take shape. Kids can start to value the reward food, which very often is a dessert or some other kind of like a salty snack, with a higher regard than the healthy food you're trying to get them to eat. What's important to remember is that children are born with natural appetite control. So if you think about when you nurse a baby, they know when to stop, right? And they know when they're hungry. When you force a child to eat everything on their plate or to eat something that they don't want to eat, you are actually disarming their innate sense of control. So they lose the ability to sense their own fullness. So when we say to kids, you have to eat everything that's on your plate or you won't get dessert, right? Not only are we setting up dessert as the sweet that becomes the target, the reward, and that the rest of the meal isn't as desirable, but we're also telling them to eat potentially when they're not hungry anymore. And we're not teaching them to sense their own innate sense of hunger and fullness. Something else I want to add here is being really careful about how we label foods. Oh, yep, Imani, you have a question. Yeah.
Yes. So for example, if you have a child and you know that they like everything that's being served, but you know that they will eat more of one thing versus the other, is it okay to give them their meals in, like, not give everything at once, like kind of give it in portions, I should say, like maybe give the vegetables first and then meat and then the fruit, so that, because knowing that if you give them everything at once, they'll eat more of one and not the other.
Yep. So that's one way to do it. And this is where you might have to kind of figure out what works for you. So if you know that the child will accept everything, but they're going to tend to gravitate toward one thing. You could do it either way, actually. You could
Okay.
either portion it and say, like, here's the thing that I know that this kid really loves, and I'm just going to put it on the plate, but this is what they get.
Okay.
My sister-in-law does that. She bakes a lot, so my niece loves to have the sweets that they bake. And when my sister-in-law puts dinner on the plate, she puts the brownie on the plate with the rest of the entree. So if the kid eats it first or if she eats it last, it doesn't matter, but that's what she's getting. And
Okay.
it's controlled that way. The other thing that I've seen is for some more extreme situations where there's definitely a food preference. I've actually seen these plates that look like a clock, and they actually look like a dial. And the child has to have what's in spot A before they can turn the dial into spot
Okay.
B. And it's used usually when there's like stronger learning and intellectual delays or things like that, or when there's like real sensory issues. But it's a way to sort of teach the child, like, start with 1, go to 2, go to 3, then we go back to 1, back to 2, back to 3.
Okay.
And depending on the child, you could do that as well, right? Like if you ever when we have a vision impaired person, right, we tell them where their food is on the clock. And you could do that with the child. Like we start at
Okay.
the right corner, we have some of this, then we have some of this, then we have some of this, then we start again and we make a circle. And that could actually be a game
Okay.
and make it more interactive. Thank you. Good question. So I want to
I
get
have
back.
just one other question.
Sure.
So in terms of the children, eating their meals, so especially like with the daycare, and I see it at home as well, is sometimes children get excited because they see maybe their friends already finished and they're playing, or I'm at home, my one of the sons finished and the other is just like, you can see them like, and we try to keep everybody at the table, but we're not forcing people obviously to stay at the table.
Right.
Like, do you recommend just leaving the food, like taking it away? Like if they're just gonna get up, do you say like, well, okay, but like that's the meal, or do you just put it in the fridge for later? Because I want to discourage getting up and sitting down, getting up and sitting down,
Right.
like let's eat our meal. But
Right.
how do you kind of approach that?
So I think so that's a good question. I think that again, that becomes sort of what the cultural norm is at either the family table or at the table at school, and setting the tone and reinforcing that. So if the rule is that you have to stay at the table until everyone's finished, and maybe that doesn't work with the younger children, but it works with older children or it works at home, right?
Mhm.
Um, then that's the expectation. And the expectation is if you finish eating, we wait politely for other people to finish. And it's okay. We still have a conversation, we sing a song, we talk, we do whatever, but we all stay at the table with our friends or with our family. But if if your culture is to say when you're finished eating, it's okay to leave the table, um, then I would go to what you were saying about, but this is when the food is available. And
Right.
we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the parent versus child relationship role in there. But I would say, this is when the food is being served. If you choose to leave the table, okay. If you come back and everybody else is still at the table and the food is still here, great. But if the meal is done and the food has been put away, you're not getting anything else. And that's also where you help to teach the children to sit at the table, be respectful of everybody else, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll definitely get back into that. Do you want to just talk about labeling? So we want to be really careful about using the terms good or bad when it comes to food. This leads to unhealthy relationships with food and the ability to lose the intuitive eating that we're born with. So positive and negative labels can really confuse children and set up conflict in their minds. So, how is a cookie bad? It tastes so good, right? Well, a cookie isn't bad. It's not bad food, but it's not something that gives our bodies a lot of nutrition. So we have less cookies and we have more vegetables and fruit because that gives our bodies a little bit more nutrition to help them grow. It's not bad. It's just something that we have to balance. And it's really important also that the messages be as consistent as possible throughout those who are the role models. and that it not be related with the individual, right? If my teacher eats a cookie, is my teacher bad? No, I love my teacher. I have to trust my teacher, right? So we want to make sure that we're sharing it in a very open and even-handed way. In general, I always recommend trying to keep a very neutral attitude about foods. All foods can fit in moderation and in appropriate amounts. So to use language with children like, I know that you love that cantaloupe. You've had a lot of cantaloupe today. We can't only have fruit. Your body needs other foods besides fruit. So let's hold off on the cantaloupe until you've had something else, right? You're not saying you have to eat something else to earn the cantaloupe. You're saying you're teaching your child the moderation of it, and you're not making it bad. You're saying that it's an equivalent and that both are important.
That's actually a really helpful way to think about it, because I wouldn't let him, I would discourage him from eating like 1,000 cookies. So I should probably use the same, like we shouldn't like try other things and
Right. We have to
yeah.
try other things. We need to have balance. We need to have a little bit of everything in our days, in our meals to be healthy, things like that. Okay. Yeah, Imani.
I have a question from a parent.
Okay, great.
She said, can you review a timeline for what's age appropriate? My little one is 20 months and I'm not sure when it's okay to not offer an option. If my little one doesn't like what I give him for dinner, I'll try one other option. This doesn't happen very often, but when is it a good time to implement this is what everyone is having? Also, we don't eat dinner at the same time. My husband works late.
Yep.
I feed my son dinner, but I try to wait to have dinner with my husband. Would it be better for me to just eat with my son to encourage this is what everyone is eating method? Again, it's rare when he doesn't like something I offer, but this could change as he gets older.
Absolutely. So that's great. So a couple of good questions in there. So I think what I understand of the first question is, at what point do you start this is what we're all having? So I think that with every child that's a little bit different, but when you start to see that your child is interested in the food that everybody else is having, and once you've gotten past the point of pureed vegetables and small pieces and just trying a single vegetable at a time, as Caroline suggested, to make sure that there's no allergy to it, etc., and they're eating mixed meals, there's no reason why their mixed meals have to be any different than yours. You may have to cut things up into smaller pieces. You may have to think about seasoning. You may have to think about sizes for choking hazards, etc. But if you're making a pot of vegetable soup, right, and the vegetables are well cooked and there's pasta in there, they may not be able to get the soup on the spoon and into their mouth, but there's no reason why you couldn't strain out some of those cooked vegetables and noodles that taste just like the soup, but they're cooler and they don't have all the liquid, and put them in their bowl. And then they're having the same thing everybody else is having. On the other piece about the family meal point, I want to clarify that it doesn't have to be every single meal. And it doesn't only have to be dinner. I think that we all grew up in this, like, oh, you have to have family dinner. The reality is that in our world that we live in, you may not always have everybody at the table at the same time, and you have to make decisions for your family. I will tell you that when my daughter was very young and learning to eat, my husband didn't come home until 8 o'clock at night. And there were many nights when I made the choice between putting her to bed at 8 o'clock versus having a late dinner so that we could be together as a family. And for good or for bad, many of the times she would start eating at like 7:30, 7:45, so that by the time daddy came home, we were actually sitting together as a family for part of that meal. And maybe she stayed up a little bit later than she should have, but we built that time together. You should do what works for your family. So if breakfast is the time of day when everybody is together, then make breakfast the family meal. If it doesn't happen really as much during the week, but you can do it on the weekends, whatever it is, any opportunity that you have to set that tone. And the good thing is that your kids are getting that in school. If they're having lunch at school with their teachers, with their peers, they're getting some of that social modeling already. So even if you're not doing it exactly at home, you can feel comfortable that they're getting some of that during the day, and you should do it whenever you can. And whoever the consistent adult is at the meals, that's what's important too. So whether, if it was a single parent home or a babysitter or a grandparent eating with the child, it may just be two people. That's it. That's okay. As long as the child knows that this is a regular, reliable, consistent mealtime pattern that they feel safe and comfortable with. I hope that makes sense for the person who asked the question. Um, okay, I'm going to move on. So we were talking about rewarding with attention, not with food. And I just want Caroline to share a little bit of a little follow-up on not just the labeling of foods, but why we want to think about the choices that we're making.
So even though we don't want to label foods as good as bad, as Jenna had mentioned, we do want to pay attention to certain components that may not be as beneficial to us. We want to acknowledge that too much of something isn't always healthy. The key is everything in moderation is best. So we have added sugars may add more sweetness, but also added calories. Added sugars can distort an infant's palate and develop preferences for highly sweetened foods. This even includes using low or no calorie sweeteners such as stevia or Splenda. Sodium may add more flavor, but it's best to use less than you think. Sources include salty snacks, commercial toddler foods, processed meats, or frozen meals or frozen snacks. But there are some great alternatives is to use fresh or low sodium frozen foods, low sodium canned goods, using more herbs and spices to naturally enhance food without the added salt. Also look out for unpasteurized foods that may put your child at risk for harmful bacteria, infections that can cause severe GI issues. You want to make sure food items are pasteurized, which means a heat treatment process that destroys bacteria in food and beverages. You want to look for pasteurized juices, milks, and cheeses rather than the raw products. Also, raw honey may contain the bacteria that causes botulism. These symptoms include muscle weakness, poor feeding, or constipation. It's recommended waiting until after at least a year of age to introduce honey so the immune system is developed enough.
Okay. So this is what we were starting to talk about just prior about this focusing on each other when we're at the table. So the statistic says that only 30% of families sit down to eat dinner together every night. And again, I want to go back to what we were saying earlier. It's not just about dinner, right? It's about any opportunity to socialize children around food and around meals. It's an important component for building healthy habits and a positive relationship with eating. And let's just break down why. And again, as I said before, it doesn't have to be the entire family all sitting together, even if it's just, like I said, the one consistent adult. But if your child sees you making healthy eating choices, it will become more natural to them. Because remember, they're going to mimic your behaviors. So to the question earlier, should you wait until your husband comes home to have dinner with him, or should you eat with the child? Well, maybe it's a little of both. Maybe you're having some of your meal with your child so that they see the way you eat so that they can mimic that behavior. And then you save the rest of it and have it later with the other adult in the home. May not always be the easiest thing to do. I get that. But family meals have really been shown to have a powerful influence on many facets of childhood: growth, development, social adjustment, behavior, eating habits, body weight, all of that. And as I was saying earlier, regular meal times with standard rules and with structure provide a sense of safety and security for a child. So, even if you're not sure how to do it on your own at home, I would ask your team here at school, because they'll tell you what kinds of culture they set up at the table and what the rules are and what the teachers model at the table. And then maybe that's a step for you to also follow at home so your child gets the consistency. And again, that helps to have that safety, that sense of safety and structure between school and home as well. Mealtime should be, I'll say, fun. Doesn't always have to be a party. It doesn't always have to be a celebration, but it should be stress-free. And I think that's really key. If meals are stressful, If we're fighting with each other, if we're angry, if there's pressure. So I'll go back to Leah's question about, her son and the cantaloupe, right? If he feels pressured all the time that he has to eat that meat, that's not going to be a positive environment. And it's going to make the experience a negative one for him. And he's going to tie eating to being a negative experience. So we want to try to remove as much of that pressure as possible. So having the positive adult role model there helps the child to feel connected and supported. We got to put away the electronics. We want to eat mindfully, right? Put away the phone, focus on eating together. And if you're not sure how to host the table with a small child, start with the basics. What are the colors on the table? What color is the broccoli? What are the textures of the foods? Can you point out something that's crispy? Can you point out something that's soft? Cultural origins of the foods or family history origins of foods. Do you remember when we were on vacation in Puerto Rico and we had plantains? Well, this is the same thing that we had on vacation. Or this is the soup that my grandma used to make for me when I was a little girl, right? So this is part of storytelling, it's part of history, and it's part of culture. So those are ways to include education at the table, even if you're not sure what else to talk about with your kid, if you don't want to tell them about your horrible day at work.
One thing I found, and I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but during COVID, because we couldn't see our family, we actually did, we would FaceTime a lot and put cameras on both the kids. So we had all this whole setup, and so they could eat, and a lot of times my parents would be eating as well. And so we still do that from time to time, which is it's nice too, because I run out of things to talk about with little kids sometimes. But it's actually kind of fun too, because then they ask what she's eating for dinner, and they talk about their day. And so it's just a fun idea, something that we like to do.
I love that. And I think that's a positive use of screens and technology at the table, right?
It evolves usually after 10 minutes into them just talking to each other, but it's still fun for a little while.
Right. But it's not you staring at your phone while your kids are trying to eat. It's actually encouraging other positive adult role modeling in there and conversation, which is terrific. I love that idea. So this is something I was starting to talk about a little bit earlier, and this is the division of responsibility. So this is based on the work of Ellen Satter, who is considered to be the godmother of pediatric nutrition. And Satter division of responsibility is what we call child-centered feeding. Means that the parent or the adult, right? And so in school, it's the adults decide who is, sorry, let me start over. The adult is responsible for saying what is being served, when it's being served, and where. The child is responsible for determining how much they eat and whether or not they eat it. So that's how we create the environment and provide the foods and all the things that we want our child to have and to focus on, but then we encourage the child's innate hunger and fullness and their own sense of control by letting them choose how much and whether or not they're going to eat it. So as the adult, you control what food comes into the house, you make and prepare the meals, you can insist that your child shows up for the meals. It's your job to host that table and make the meal times as pleasant as possible to set the tone, to teach proper behavior at the table. So that was the question we were talking about before, right? About what are the norms, whether it's at school or at home. And you regulate the timing and the content of snacks and meals. So if in your home, there's no running with food, there's no food right before dinner. Some families may decide that, they want to set up a healthy relationship with sweets. So they always have a sweet snack in the afternoon. So there's never a question that there's always going to be a sweet in the afternoon. And then we're not looking for it again later in the day, and we can focus on dinner. So if your family's rule is that you have ice cream at 3 o'clock, great, that's your rule, whatever it is. You're setting the tone for your family. So again, the adult makes those choices. And then for the child, again, they need to build their individual capabilities to determine hunger and fullness. So your child knows how much they need to eat in most cases and can be capable to make up errors in regulation. So your child's body will regulate if you let it. If your child doesn't eat for a meal or two, it will catch up with them. They will eventually eat. Now, depending on what you choose to give them, they may, if left to their own devices, choose lots of things that you don't want them to eat. But that's where your role as the adult is to make sure that they have the good choices that you want them to have. And you set the parameters around that. Okay. So in order for this to work, you really need to listen to your kid. You really need to be mindful that your child will not always eat the same amount of food. Some days they'll eat a lot. Some days they'll eat very little. Some days they might not eat anything. And in general, that's okay, right? You know when your child is sick. You know when your child has a fever that they may not be eating as much. So you want to be attuned to those things, but just like adults, right? Some days you're hungry, some days you're not. Depends how much energy you've expended that day. It depends on how hard you've worked. So it's okay if they don't have the same amount all the time and at every meal. And don't get hung up on what they have at one meal or one day. Think about it over the course of a week. Okay, so if they've had a lot of protein earlier in the week and maybe they're having a little less later, they're probably going to be okay. It's going to even out over time. Avoid pressure, as we've talked about before. So putting pressure on the child when they're eating creates a stressful association with meal times. We want to try to avoid that. And they are little psychological experiments in the making. So trying to get a kid to eat more when they don't want to eat more makes them want to eat less, right? Just to spite you. Trying to get them to eat less makes them want to eat more. Trying to get them to eat certain foods makes them want to avoid them. So don't try to outthink it, right? They're going to find their way around that one. You need to be patient. You need to really allow your child to follow their hunger cues. What's put on the plate, you don't have to eat it all. You can't judge their hunger and fullness. Only they can. But you can use the language and the cues to help them determine that. So to say, does your tummy feel full? Does your tummy feel hungry? Is it rumbling? Is it making noises? Oh, that means you're still a little hungry. Or, you know what, let's take a little break for a couple of minutes and talk about what happened at school today. And then after a few minutes, you can tell me whether you still feel hungry or not and want to eat something else. Same thing goes for adults as for kids. It takes about 20 minutes for our stomach and our brain to communicate with each other. So give your kid a little bit of a break and then check back in with them. Are you still hungry? Do you really want to eat another helping of that? Or you're still hungry? Great, I'll put a little bit more on your plate. Okay, but teaching them how to check in with their bodies. And it's really important to accept that each child learns to accept food in their own way. Your kids' tastes are going to change periodically, so be patient and be ready to roll with it. Everybody who's said already that their kids are really good about eating everything, yeah, that's going to change. And then it'll go back because they're kids and that's what they do. That's how they learn to have control in their lives. Child development is pretty predictable. It goes on a scale and every child is going to develop their own food personality. One story I love to tell is how my daughter ate bananas until she was 2.5. And she ate bananas all the time until she could tell us that she hated bananas. She is 22 years old and she hates bananas. And when we said to her when she was 2.5, but you ate bananas before, why wouldn't you eat them? She said, I never liked them. I just couldn't tell you. And like, we had to respect that. So you also want to be careful about labeling kids. You know, who's an eager or adventurous eater, who's a cautious eater or a picky eater. You want to be really careful about having negative connotations to how they eat because they hear how you are labeling them and will respond to it. So to say, oh, my kid is so picky. Well, guess what? That kid's going to continue to be picky because you've labeled them that way. But to say, my kid has some strong preferences, but we're working on trying lots of different things is going to be a little bit more positive way of looking at it. Really, really, really need to think about patience repetition, and having a long-term focus. You are playing the long game when it comes to child nutrition. You might have to expose a new food 20 times before that kid will taste it, never mind accept it. You have to build familiarity and acceptance without force and stress. And like I said, you're playing a long game. Don't worry about whether or not he eats it today. You want to keep repeating it and keep putting it out there so that eventually it becomes the norm. It becomes expected. So Caroline's going to just add a couple of other healthy habits that we want to recommend that you keep in mind besides the food piece of this. If it wants to work. There we go. Oops, sorry, go back. Okay.
So as Jenna had mentioned before about making sure you put screen time away, there are two other key habits to consider. Just first, limiting screen time is important for both kids and adults. We want to educate on being present when eating together. We want to educate your child on the importance of being present during meal times and focusing on the food and those around them. Also having a variety of discussions, including the meal and the foods you're eating. You want to encourage the conversation about what you're putting into your bodies. You want to avoid distracted eating. TV viewing and too much screen time may lead to overeating and a reduction in energy expenditure. TV or screens are a distraction when it comes to eating sensible amounts, unless you had that great idea as Leah did. You want to remove electronics during meal times. This includes TV, phones, and tablets. And when you're distracted, you don't pay attention to how much you're eating and you're not in tune with your own eating cues. For example, if you're eating popcorn during watching a movie, that can lead to mindless eating. You want to try to limit screen time to less than 2 hours a day for children. You can break this up by breaking up screen time with physical activity breaks and encourage children to have greater opportunities for movement and activity rather than ample sit-down time. Second, we want to encourage physical activity for everyone. Make it a family activity. Get everyone involved as it sets a good example that it's important and for all family members. You want to take your kids to the park to walk when appropriate, jog, inline skate, or play catch. Make walking the dog a fun game by counting how many times the dog stops or how many rabbits or squirrels the dog sees. Cultivate an attitude of let's do rather than let's see or let's watch. This is easier if you're an active parent yourself. So being healthy physical activity and healthy eating go hand in hand. Physical activity is a key factor in the big pictures of developing a healthy lifestyle. The CDC recommendation for physical activity for children is 60 minutes a day. You can help them have greater opportunities for movement and activity, and encouraging this at a young age, like healthy eating, is also very important.
So, we can't really emphasize that enough. It's not just the food, it's also the activity and the mindfulness. All three pieces really go together in helping to build healthy eaters. And again, as I said, for the long game. So just to recap, a couple of the things we talked about, and then happy to take some more questions at the end if you have them. Want to be a positive role model. So thinking about what you're saying and what you're doing and remembering that your child is a sponge. They hear and copy everything. And often it comes out when you least expect it and it embarrasses you. We've all been there. You want to involve your children in making healthy food choices. You can make it a game, you can make it an educational opportunity, but getting them thinking about it and being part of the process earlier, again, builds that habit for thinking about it and making good choices as they age. You want to prioritize meal times and make them as enjoyable as possible, or at least as stress-free as possible. We always want to listen to the child. Remember that child-centered model of making sure that we're honoring their hunger and fullness and not imposing our expectations and our standards on them. But remembering the division of labor is really key here, that the parent decides what to serve and when, the child decides how much and if. So that's going to be that really key element to the feeding process. And then finally, getting active and staying active. You know, when your children see that you are an active adult, they will model that. And that's a really great way to make sure that you're setting up healthy habits for the future. Oh, and sleep. I don't want to forget about sleep. You know, when they see that we don't sleep, sleep becomes less important. So that's another piece to throw in there as well. So I'm going to copy here a link. I'm gonna copy this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to put a link to our handouts in, I'm trying to get over to my chat. There we go. So this says hosts and panelists. Let me get this for everyone. Okay, so here is the link to our Google Doc. And what we're giving you, actually, let me open it up here so you can see it. It's 2 pages on this handout. Oops, just lost my screen. One side is my healthy smoothies recommendations. And the other side is some ideas for snacks. So let me just share this with you quickly so you can see what you're getting.
That was going to be my question, is around snacking.
Yeah.
My kids, I think they just get bored and want to snack sometimes. So it's hard to, like, if you're thinking about honoring their hunger, and I don't know truly how hungry they are, but then they just want to eat like goldfish. And so I've been trying to do, well, you can have an apple or a banana, and if
Right.
they're hungry, they go for that. So that's what we're, but I want a snack. I want a snack.
Right. So you can ask that question. So snacks aren't meals, but they play an important part in the nutrition scope for the whole week. Remember, I said nutrition isn't just what they ate at that one meal or what that one day, it's what they eat over the course of the week. So, and especially with children who are eating small amounts, but whose bodies are in, you know, high levels of development, right? They need fuel. So snacking for kids can be a very important way to get additional nutrients in through the course of the day. As the parent, you get to be intentional about what you're offering and when you're offering it. And you get to set that message and have that question. So ask your kid, Leah, are you really hungry or are you just bored? Okay. Because if the answer is you're really hungry, then here's the choices, right? You can have a cheese stick, you can have peanut butter on a cracker. Like, this is what's available right now. If we leave the goldfish on the counter all the time for grazing, then look, it's going to be like the candy bowl in the office, right? You walk past it, you see it, you put your hands in it, you put it in your mouth, and it becomes mindless. But if you start teaching them to think about, am I actually hungry? Do I need to eat? And then providing the snack that is the healthier snack that you want them to have, or providing choices for them to choose from as they get a little bit older, then you're honoring that hunger and you're honoring their independent choice, but you're also still keeping the framework around it. Snacks really should, you know, we tend as a culture to use higher carbohydrate processed stuff as snacks. But if you really want to think about a snack as being a boost to maintain energy levels between meals, or especially for younger children as a source of additional nutrients, then think about them like a mini meal. You wouldn't serve a meal that was just a slice of bread or just crackers, right? You would put some carbohydrate and some protein and some fat on that plate. So there would be the meat and the vegetables, and maybe there's dressing on the vegetables and there's a grain. So thinking about snacks that have a combination. So maybe we have carrots and hummus, or we have a little mini peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or we have cheese and crackers, whatever it is. Pairing those foods together are going to help. The protein and the fat is going to help that child to feel, or anybody to feel full. The carbohydrate is going to give them the energy, and having the protein and the fat with the carbohydrate slows down the body's usage of the carbohydrate, so they have the energy for longer. So that's the psychology and the physiology piece behind snacks. So the handout, you've got snacking together. talking about using higher protein and fiber, keeping sugar and fat low, some ideas for examples, and then I've got the my simple smoothies recipes that you can have as a takeaway from this. And for these, you'll notice that I'm using low-fat Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is the higher protein option. So by using Greek yogurt in the snack smoothie, and we're talking about a small amount, we're not giving a kid a 16-ounce portion, right? We're talking about maybe you make one and you divide it up between, 4 or 6 children. But even still, that is a protein boost as well as the fruit and milk. And it's going to go for fullness and satiety, and level out the energy usage. So just some suggestions there for you. Other questions? Yeah, Imani, go ahead.
Okay, so what I struggle with personally, so my younger one that's in daycare, that's in Kiddie Academy, we serve meals hot and fresh, right? But the ones that are in school, the school age ones, they do not like the lunch at all. So my older ones, when they come home from school, because they just don't eat any of the school food, are starving. Yep. So 2 things I'm trying to struggle with is finding things that I can send them to school with that they'll eat, because a lot of times they won't take the leftovers because they're like, oh, it's too cold, it's soggy, it's whatever. They're sick and tired of sandwiches, but then it's when they get home at 3:45, they're going to the kitchen and just eating everything in sight.
So, and a lot of it also, and one of the things that's really frustrating is, especially when they get into middle school and lunch is at 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
That drives me nuts. I know. So you might want to think about it as, what are things that they like that are components that work together, but it doesn't have to be a formal meal. If they don't want to eat the leftovers, or if they don't want to eat a sandwich, will they eat a cheese stick or 2 cheese sticks if they're, a bigger kid that needs a little bit more protein, and an orange and, some cracker, put together the components from different things. It doesn't have to make sense as a meal necessarily. It's okay if it's pieces that just sort of they like and they'll eat.
So those combination snacks.
Yeah, not I'm not a Lunchables fan, right? And the Sargento snack break things aren't enough for a kid in the middle of the day, probably. But thinking that way, right? Of what's a protein food that my kid likes? Okay, my kid likes cheese sticks, or my kid will eat a hard-boiled egg, or maybe they don't like the sandwich, but I can roll up some pieces of turkey and put that in the baggie, right? And maybe it's not a sandwich with bread, but they really like Wheat Thins crackers. So I can put Wheat Thins crackers and the hard-boiled egg and the baby carrots or the grape tomatoes that I know that they like. Some people do it as a bento box concept. Think about it that way. I actually have one, but I can't grab it right now to show you. But I've actually done that a lot with families where, you have all the little compartments and you just think each compartment has to have something. So what's your protein? What's your healthy fat? Okay, that's the salad dressing that you're going to dip the carrots in. What's your, the veggie? That's okay. That's the carrots and the tomatoes. What's your grain? And you kind of put a bunch of things together. In think about all the, what's so fancy now, the charcuterie table, the grazing trays, right? So you're basically doing the same kind of thing, but you're packing it for school lunch. And then the other thing is, especially because it sounds like these are school age and older kids, they are in a significant phase of growth and development. So for them to come home from school and need to eat some more is not surprising. That totally makes sense, right? Yeah. So what I would think about though is that same kind of options for what you offer for snacks in the afternoon. Because if they're going to come home and just grab a bag of chips, that's not adding much to their development, their physical development, and it's not giving them the energy and to be able to focus and do their homework or do sports after school or whatever. Right. But if they, are thinking about it, or you at least, and what you provide, are thinking about it a little bit more as, like, here's the choices that I want you to have. This is what's available. And like, you got to go choose from there. Yogurts are a great option for an after school snack because you got protein, fat, and carbohydrate all together. And if you go for a higher protein yogurt, a little bit lower sugar, that's terrific. Or if you do the smoothies, a peanut butter jelly sandwich is always a good option because it's combined everything all together. I want to show you, in case there's a great book, which you guys might want to have in the office. And I give this to everybody I know who's having a baby. And it's called Fearless Feeding. It's by Jill Castle, who is a very well-known pediatric dietitian. She's actually in New Canaan. And Fearless Feeding is how to raise healthy eaters from high chair to high school. It has great resources in it. It actually has everything we talked about, like the parent feeding styles. We talks about portion sizes, recommendations for different ages, and what children need as they go through the developmental stages from birth through teenage years. So it could be really helpful as a guide. And she's also got a great website as well. Jill Castle is her name. I saw somebody else had a hand up. One of our attendees, Stacy.
You may have to just type the question in, Stacy, into the Q&A.
You know what? I'm going to allow her to talk. How about that? Stacy, go ahead and talk if you're there.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
So thank you for unmuting me. I was trying to type, but I am I'm a little embarrassed, but I am so struggling with getting rid of the last 2 bottles that my pediatrician told me I had to stop giving him bottles months ago, and I failed to do that. So my guy still doesn't fully sleep through the night. It's like he can wake up anywhere between like 3:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning. So he's like super inconsistent with his sleeping, and I think it's more of like and he loves his bottles. But it's only 2, one before bed and then 1 in the morning. So 1 in the morning could be anywhere between 3:30 and 6 o'clock.
And how old is he?
He's 20 months.
Okay.
So
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my doctor the pediatrician told me months ago to stop it. I just I got down to 2, and I'm stuck. I think it's more me than him, but any tips would be much appreciated.
Sure. So is he drinking from a cup otherwise?
Oh yes. Yep, he drinks from a cup, from a straw cup. So he's got, so that's good. He eats all throughout the day. I have to pack him more. We used to go to Kiddie Academy. We just recently moved. And so his new daycare doesn't provide food. So they've been telling me to pack more for him. So the eating isn't an issue. But he's still not fully sleeping through the night, and he loves his bottles.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, and I'm happy to share responding to this one with Leah and Amani, because they are younger parents than I am, or parents of younger children than I am. So they may be a little bit closer to this. What I'm wondering about is 2 things. First of all, if he's waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, he may not actually be getting enough before he's going to sleep at night. So you might want to think about either a little bit more at dinner, or even a pre-bedtime snack, but like something that is not, to take the place of the bottle. So it may be that it's a glass of milk, or it may be that it's some yogurt, or maybe, I wouldn't do anything sweet. I would do something that has some protein as well as some carbohydrate, which is why I like yogurt. But something that's going to kind of fill him up a little bit before bed. The other thing that I'm thinking about here is that this also sounds like this is kind of like a self-soothing kind of emotional thing for him. And I'm just wondering about what your other nighttime routines are and whether there's a way to have like, you know, we're not a baby anymore. We don't need to have a bottle. We have a big boy routine at night. And maybe the big boy routine at night is that he gets to read an extra storybook, or he, you know, there's something else that you can start to introduce as, you know, now that we're older, we get to have this different experience. And still, and you know, especially if the bottle was a soothing thing, you probably want it to be a calming thing that you do with him together before bedtime. But that, I'm thinking that might be something. I don't know. I see Leah and Imani both kind of are like nodding a little bit. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
I'm just remembering, I feel like my boys went through a weird phase where they were like waking up in the middle of the night and like super hungry. And so with Theo, I ended up, so I like dropped bottles one at a time. So I feel like the last bottle or like breast milk was the bedtime one. I kept that for like as long as possible. When they were waking up super early in the morning, I was like, you know what? Like, if they're hungry, I get it. They have little tummies. So I would give them like a banana or something. Like I would take them downstairs, give them a little food, and then try to put them back to bed. Because I was like, well, like if they're hungry, like they are hungry, but I tried to switch it to like a bite of food, as opposed to the milk. Because I mean, if I'm hungry, like I can't sleep if I'm hungry. So
Yeah, and that, but that's where I would try to do it before bedtime, and it so that they're not getting, because you don't want to get in the habit of we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and we get to eat something.
And yeah, agree. I agree with that. I think that maybe giving him a little bit more before bed. And my now 6-year-old, he didn't sleep through the night until like after 18 months. And he was actually the only one. And it was because he just wasn't getting enough food. So once we just kind of started giving him more food, at dinner time, he was more full, and then he started to definitely sleep through the night.
And you want to make sure that what he's getting more of, as I said before, is a little bit more protein and some healthy fat in there too. If your kid likes avocado, great source of really healthy fat and vitamin C. My daughter loved mashed avocado. Trying to think what else.
My niece actually, she would wake up. When my first niece, she was still living with us. She would wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and my sister was losing it. So one day, my niece saw me eating oatmeal because it was the winter time. She saw me eating oatmeal. She was like, "Can I try some oatmeal?" I'm like, "Sure." We try some oatmeal. We could put some fruit in there. After we started giving her the oatmeal before she would go, maybe like an hour and a half before going to sleep, she was sleeping through the night.
Yeah.
And even now, when she wants that comfort, she'll ask for oatmeal.
And again, we want to be careful about tying it to self-comforting, right? We don't want food to be self-soothing all the time. So, you know, just thinking about including it at the mealtime or as a designated evening snack, and not as I get to eat whenever I want and whenever I wake mommy up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So how do I get him to eat more? Because I do when he tells me he's done, then I don't force. Well, I do wait a couple minutes and to say like, are you sure you're all done? And I might get like 1 or 2 more bites, but that's it. And I offer him a snack, and he doesn't always want it at night before bed. So I guess maybe I just have to work on better snack options to maybe get him more excited, or maybe present it a different way.
Well, you also actually may just need to up the calorie content of what he's getting.
Okay.
So for example, like if there are mashed potatoes, you can make them with Greek yogurt instead of
like milk and butter.
and
Okay.
that would add protein to it.
Okay.
You could do, that's why I said like mashed avocado or
Mhm.
adding avocado, that because it's great texture and it can pick up pieces of it, and it's really good healthy fat. If you do like, if he can do nuts, do some nut butter on things. Like, look for foods that are a little bit more calorie dense from fat and protein.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Got anything else for us while we're here? All right. Cool. Well, I think that we had some great questions, and I'm glad that we were able to troubleshoot a little bit together. So that was fun.
This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're
Definitely.
welcome.
Thank
You're welcome.
you.
I feel like
All
I
right.
always learn so much every time, and the next time we do this, I'll be like, these other tricks really help too. So I can't wait to do it.
Well, and every time I talk to you, your kids are older and you have new issues.
It's true, but I will say we've been working very hard on we just put the food on the table, they eat it or don't eat it. It went through a period where they didn't really try a lot, but now I can see like the older one is getting much more adventurous. He's willing to try things more. We don't make a big deal. Like I'll be like, wow, you're a really big boy. Like, thank you for trying that. Did you like it? What didn't you like? But like I see him like being more adventurous, and so that makes me very happy to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's totally a long game. I was telling Caroline, I was reading a book the other day by the food writer Ruth Reichel, and she was talking about the fact. So this is a woman who was a restaurant critic and food writer for her entire life. Her son, up until he was about 10, only ate white food. Okay. And she tells the story of they would go to their neighborhood Japanese restaurant, and she and her husband would eat all the sushi, whatever, and the kid would eat a bowl of rice.
We order that at our local Mexican restaurant. He orders rice and like
Yep.
the Mexican rice and like French fries, and I've just given up because it's Friday and like
Right. But the key to this story is that they were regulars at this restaurant. The sushi chef was always the same guy all the time. And little by little over time, the sushi chef started adding little things to the rice.
oh,
And one day the kid said, "Hey, can I try that again?" And then another and another. And over a course of years of going there. So if this is the Mexican restaurant you go to every Friday, right? Eventually, like, hey, you've had the rice for a million years. You want to add some beans to that? You want to put a little salsa on that, right? And then it builds up eventually. So this person in the story is now in his 30s and is a great eater. So
he eats all the colors.
he eats all the colors. All right. Well, thank you both so much. I'm going to wrap us up, and we're always here if you have questions or anything else. Just let us know.
Thank you. We'll share your information with all the folks that signed up so that if people do have questions, they can just connect with you directly.
You got it. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Nice to meet you, Stacy. Nice to meet you.
Thank
Good luck.
you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.